He is testing us. Every day, our Lord is testing us. If he wasn't testing us, how would you account for the sorry state of our society? For the crimes that plague the big cities of this country? When he could sweep this pestilence from the face of the earth with one mighty gesture of his hand. If our Lord wasn't testing us, how would you account for the proliferation these days of this obscene rock and roll music with its gospel of easy sexuality and relaxed morality? If our Lord wasn't testing us, why, he could take all these pornographic books and albums and turn them into one big fiery cinder like that. But how would that make us stronger for him?
The book burners are here. In terms of free speech and the defense thereof, this month has been one of the worst in our nation's history. And those people who don't kowtow to either the street mob or Twitterteria regarding the George Floyd controversy are finding themselves canceled, fired, and socially exiled for life. I've always said history is his story, and it is written by the winners many of times because the losers are not around, sometimes killed. So therefore, history is written by those left standing. Sometimes it is the agreed upon lie. Those who don't agree with the lie are considered dissenters. This has been going on for millennia. Even right now, as we are all alive in the midst of a pandemic, the racial tensions, we cannot figure out exactly what is going on and who is telling the truth. The disinformation is real. One thing to keep in mind, what will be written for our future generations to read? What will they be arguing over 50 years from now about this time? Puts it into perspective. Opinion editor James Bennett of the New York Times was forced to resign after printing an article by Senator Tom Cotton that fellow staffers claimed put them in danger. Bennett is not alone. Magazine editors, TV stars, sports announcers, university professors, radio hosts, and newspaper reporters donned their scarlet letters and took the walk of shame after uttering their respective blasphemies. Most caved to the will of the online show trials, offering false confessions and begging for their inquisitors' forgiveness for their alleged transgressions. Many of these allies turned enemies had previously fancied themselves modern-day Robsberries. Unfortunately for them, they were correct. At China's request, the US-based video conferencing company Zoom shut down meetings commemorating the victims of the Tiananmen Square massacre and suspended the accounts of the participating activist. Over at HBO, the writers of Looney Tunes are removing Elmer Fudd's shotgun from all future episodes. Writer Michael Rakuo defended the decision, claiming that the shotgun represented Elmer's flawed, challenged masculinity, which one assumes would be the ideal straw man prop for today's hyper-woke audience. And then, in true Orwellian fashion, Merriam-Webster is revising its definition of racism after receiving an email from a 22-year-old Kennedy Mitchum, who felt that the current definition didn't satisfy her political agenda and decided for herself that it should be changed. Editor Alex Chambers folded like wet paper, explaining that the definition was indeed being revised, and whimpering regret for the harm and offense that we have caused in failing to address this issue sooner. Folks, we have now reached the point where any perpetual aggrieved activist can literally change the definitions of words, and the gatekeepers comply without batting an eye. Whoever controls the language controls the debate. The worst example of censorship masquerading as progressive comes from the NPR's Juan Vidal, who penned an article entitled "Your Bookshelf May Be Part of the Problem." In it, Vidal issues blanket statements against white people and the book he assumes that you own. His argument boils down to the idea that if your book's authors are predominantly white, then you are simply listening to your own voice on repeat. Vidal claims that the books white people read are rooted in colonist ideals, and that white people should be actively resisting and casting aside these books. Now, leave aside the fact that Vidal offers no standard for which he determined the books written by white authors are colonist or racist, his racist assumptions about white people's reading habits. It is imperative to note that Vidal is not suggesting books to expand your collection. He is demanding you reduce your current collection. He is not advocating adding new voices to the pool of existing ones. He is advocating replacing voices with ones he approves of, while jettisoning the ones he considers unworthy, peddling the notion that only anti-racist books are good books. He states that reading such books is ineffective unless the readers silence themselves first. And by themselves, he means white authors only, which he considers simply an echo of white readers. One wonders which white books or white authors Vidal considers to be part of the problem. Mein Kampf? Fair enough. Which other white colonist books would Vidal prefer we toss to the bonfires? A Tale of Two Cities? Crime and Punishment? Dante's Inferno? Does it not reflect the genius and equality of literature that one doesn't have to be a 19th century French popard to be able to emphasize with Jean Valjean in the same way as one doesn't need to be a 19th century black slave to empathize with Uncle Tom? The heretics mentioned at the start of this video were punished for public utterances against the clerisy. Vidal takes the next logical step down that totalitarian path, reprimanding us for what we shouldn't be reading and or thinking, for that matter. They want to control what you think, not in the public square, but rather in the privacy of your own home and within the confines of your own mind. It won't stop at books, folks. One shudders to think which artists, musicians, and philosophers will soon be lambasted as the colonists based on no factor other than, well, you're white. Should Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel be painted over with whatever Drac Anna Madeira refers to as art? Should Choplin's Nocturnes be forever silenced in favor of the incoherent Nicki Minaj? Vidal asserts that reading broadly is how we demand visibility. This is a good idea, which unfortunately is completely antithetically to the rest of his article. The only difference between his innovation to censor and the 1933 Nazi-sponsored book burnings is that the latter were less insidious about their true intentions. In this time of censorship, groupthink, and mob rule, Primo Levi and Alexander Solsterin demand visibility. Harriet Beecher Stowe and Dirth Pran demand visibility. They all have lessons, none of which depends on skin color, to teach the likes of Vidal. Quoting Vidal for the last time in my life, he claims that books white people read are rooted in colonist ideas and that white people should be actively resisting and casting aside these books. Thus, in his eyes, we are judged not by the content of our character, but by the color of our skin. Folks, we are at war. Trump signed an emergency executive order for the censorship. Internet censorship is, of course, the new book burning, and we are constantly judged by the color of our skin. Our views on climate, our views on guns, on border, on sovereignty, on everything. This is an ongoing battle. Again, I am Michael. This is the Patriot Hour. God bless, Godspeed to each and every one of you. And where we go one, we go all.
On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, died after a white police officer, holding his knee on Floyd's neck, pinned him to the pavement while he was in handcuffs. In the days that followed, public outrage grew over what some protesters and lawmakers said is another case of police brutality against a black man.